Any talk of the Illuminati normally begins with a man called Adam Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt was born on February the 6th, 1748, in Bavaria, Germany. At the age of 7 he enrolled in a Jesuit school, and the occult ideas that were taught to him from that young age stuck with him for the rest of his life, helping to form his worldview and ideologies. As he grew up, he also studied classic religion, which is a euphemism for Gnosticism and other ancient forms of the mysteries. Thus, by the time Weishaupt reached adult maturity, he was very well versed in the occult. When Pope Clement XIV abolished the Jesuits in 1773, Weishaupt went on to become a professor of Catholic canon law, a post that only Jesuits had ever held up until that point, and within a few years he had joined the secret society of Freemasonry. Now, when Adam Weishaupt joined Freemasonry in the 1770s, it had already long been a fully occult society, but it was organized into the telltale pyramid-shaped knowledge hierarchy. The masses or muggles at the lower end of the society were completely ignorant of the true nature and meaning behind their doctrines and rituals. It was only as they rose through the degrees of esoteric knowledge and moved closer to the all-seeing eye of Lucifer at the top that the truth, or so-called light of Freemasonry as they see it, began to illuminate their minds. I use the past tense, but it's the same today. In the Scottish Rite version of Freemasonry, which is the most widely known and practiced, there are a minimum of 33 degrees to ascend through in the hierarchy, with still more elite Illuminati degrees, such as the Shriners above that. Those in the lower degrees simply have no clue that they are part of an organization that ultimately worships Baal, Asherah, and Lucifer. Even those relatively high up are misdirected, and even Christians have been ensnared in the organization, believing it is compatible or even complementary to their faith. Weishaupt, however, was no such muggle. With his Jesuit background and knowledge of the mysteries through his studies of classical religion and Greek philosophy, he was well aware of the origin of the doctrines and rituals of speculative Masonry. Therefore, on May 1st, 1776, just 3 years after the Jesuits were formally shut down, he attempted to form his own elite secret society within a secret society. He would base it on the exact same principles and techniques of the Jesuit order. He would try, and largely fail, to recruit ex-Jesuits as initiates, and would call this order the Order of Perfectibilists. In time, they became more famously known as Ordo Illuminati Bavarensis, or the Illuminati for short. The Illuminati means the Enlightened Ones. These were to be an elite group made up of only those at the top of the Freemasons' pyramid. They prided themselves on their intellectual superiority and depth of insight over the average man, whether Freemason or not. Incidentally, Weishaupt's name literally translates as the man to lead those who know. The word Adam means man, the word Weiss means to know, and Haupt means leader. The Illuminati were basically the Jesuits reincarnated under a deist or secular guise. When Weishaupt approached ex-Jesuits to join the order, he baited them with the promise that they would recover the influence which they had formerly possessed. He imbued the Illuminati with the exact same ideas that had pervaded the Jesuit order, those characteristics we associate with Jezebel or Asherah. Like the Jesuits, the aim of the Illuminati was nothing less than complete power and control. Most worryingly of all, they retained the core mantra that would justify any number of atrocities, that the end justifies the means. The end, in the case of the Illuminati, was the complete destruction of all Christianity, the overturn of all monarchies, and the creation of a new world order. The deists, Freemasons, and Illuminists recognized that kings and queens derived their temporal authority from the spiritual authority of the Pope, and that he effectively controlled monarchies from behind the scenes, just as Nimrod and Semiramis maintained control of their empire through perceived religious authority. Monarchs in Europe looked for the same kind of confirmation from popes to maintain control of their own lands. Their rule was not legitimate unless the Pope said so. Therefore, in the eyes of the populace, there was this inextricable link between monarchies and the corrupt Catholic religious system, and it was this joining of the Church and the State, the temporal and spiritual, that had brought so much oppression and wickedness. The solution for the Illuminati, therefore, was to separate Church and State and to destroy both in the process. Christianity would be shut down, and the monarchies who derived their legitimacy from the Pope would have to be overthrown. There would need to be revolution. This is effectively what the Illuminati set out to achieve. Professor John Robinson, a Freemason who claims he was approached by the Illuminati to join the elite order, wrote in his book Proofs of Conspiracy in 1797, "The Illuminati were conceived, organized, and activated by professionals and intellectuals, many of them brilliant but cunning and clever, who decided to put their minds in the service of total evil. A conspiracy conceived not by Masons as Masons, but by evil men using Freemasonry as a vehicle for their own purposes. I have found that the cover of a Masonic lodge has been employed in every country for venting and propagating sentiments in religion and politics that could not have circulated in public without exposing the author to great danger. I found that this impunity has gradually encouraged men of licentious principles to become more bold and to teach doctrines subversive of all our confidence in the moral government of the universe. I have been able to trace these attempts made under the specious pretext of enlightening the world by the torch of philosophy. I have observed these doctrines gradually diffusing and mixing with all the different systems of Freemasonry till at last an association has been formed for the express purpose of rooting out all the religious establishments and overturning all the existing governments of Europe. The primary goal of the Illuminist is to get the possession of riches, power and influence without industry, and to accomplish this they want to abolish Christianity, and then universal profligacy will procure them the adherence of all the wicked and enable them to overturn all the civil governments of Europe, after which they will think of farther conquests and extend their operations to the other quarters of the globe. Just a quick interjection to point out the important statement made that abolishing Christianity would lead to universal profligacy. This is still true today. The spiritual temperature of a city, nation and continent largely depends on the spiritual temperature of the Christian Church. If we find our culture falling into wickedness, it is probably because our churches are failing. While just our mere presence on the earth is slowing the rate of decay and acting as a barrier to Satan, we have been told to be salt and light. How salty we are will preserve morals and standards in our society, and how brightly we shine will determine the kind of place we live in. We need to shake off apathy and fear and learn how to be both salt and light again today. John Robinson then goes further, explaining, "An association has been formed for the express purposes of rooting out all the religious establishments and overturning all existing governments. The leaders would rule the world with uncontrollable power, while all the rest would be employed as tools of the ambition of their unknown superiors." Robinson is describing an occult hierarchy here, a few elite, illuminated ones ruling over a mass of muggles, except this time it's on a global scale. Weishaupt was well aware that Freemasonry was the perfect vehicle for the Illuminati simply because of its secrecy. He says, "The great strength of our order lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always concealed by another name and another occupation. None is fitter than the lower degrees of Freemasonry. The public is accustomed to it, expects little from it, and therefore takes little notice of it. Next to this, the form of a learned or literary society is best suited to our purpose, and had Freemasonry not existed, this cover would have been employed." Freemasonry was chosen because the public already knew about it and thought it harmless. Its origins as a trade union for craftsmen meant the average person thought nothing of it, and this was the perfect cloak of cover. If we look a little more at the principles of the Illuminati, we'll see them as a continuation of the Jesuit order. For example, Adam Weishaupt wrote, "If in order to destroy all Christianity, all religion, we have pretended to have the sole true religion, remember that the end justifies the means. Those which we have taken to deliver you, those which we have taken to deliver one day the human race from all religion, are nothing else than a pious fraud which we reserve to unveil one day in the grade of Magus or philosopher illuminated." Once again we see that phrase, "the end justifies the means." Everything and anything could be perpetrated by an Illuminist as long as the end result was the right one, the advancement of a new type of society. This could, and indeed would, involve even violent revolution and the destruction of property, lives, and society itself. One of the mottos of the Illuminati was "Order out of chaos." The idea was that they'd introduce chaos in the forms of wars, fighting and distrust, and then having created it in the first place, step in to offer their own self-serving solutions which people would clamber to accept. Using the fifth column, a network of spies would be integrated into society to do the job. In these respects, there was virtually no difference between the Jesuit order that Weishaupt had come from and his new society. The only real difference was that the Jesuits had claimed to be a religious order, while the Illuminati conducted their efforts in a deistic or secular guise. We see in the Illuminati the trademark thirst for control that suggests Ashura's presence. The Illuminati didn't care whether people agreed to be ruled by them or not. They saw it as their right, as intellectual superiors to the Muggles, to impose upon the world what was best for it. The Illuminati were, and still are, a people who despise legitimate authority and work tirelessly to usurp it. When they are in a position of weakness, they work towards that end through subterfuge, deception, and lies. However, they made no bones of the fact that they fully expected to one day be in a position of power, and when that day came, they would rule tyrannically with intimidation and terror. Their ultimate aim was complete control, and they would go to any lengths to attain it. The whole order works within the trademark hierarchy system as well. Some quotes. The first duty of the reader of this synopsis is to obey the edicts of his Grand Lodge. Right or wrong, his very existence as a Mason hangs upon obedience to the powers immediately set above him. Failure in this must infallibly bring down expulsion, which, as a Masonic death, ends all. The one unpardonable crime in a Mason is contumacy or disobedience. The first duty of every Mason is to obey the mandate of the Master. The order must at once be obeyed. Its character and its consequences may be matters of subsequent inquiry. The Masonic rule of obedience is like the nautical imperative: obey orders even if you break owners. Again, just like the Jesuits, right or wrong is unimportant compared to slavish obedience to the hierarchy. Combined with the end justifies the means, there are no moral barriers left between people and the darkest depths of depravity. Superiors would command inferiors to commit a crime, and then, having done it, superiors could blackmail them by threatening to expose their actions. The Jesuits also used confessional booths to blackmail and control kings and queens in this manner. According to a joint deposition signed by Professor Renner and his 3 colleagues, the object of the first degrees of Illuminism was to train the adepts in the system of espionage. Once the member had so committed himself to such nefarious acts of espionage, treason, or other treacherous enterprises, he remained in a state of perpetual dread, fearing his superiors might at some time reveal the criminal activity. Remember how the Jesuits had various methods of suppressing their conscience and avoiding justice that mainly centered on lying, deception of self and others. This also continues in the Illuminati. You must conceal all the crimes of your brother Masons, except murder and treason, and these only at your own option. And should you be summoned as a witness against a brother Mason, be always sure to shield him. Prevaricate, don't tell the whole truth in his case, keep his secrets, forget the most important points. It may be perjury to do this, it is true, but you're keeping your obligations, and remember, if you live up to your obligations strictly, you'll be free from sin. As for the Ashura or Jezebel trait of intimidation, when a brother reveals any of our great secrets, whenever, for instance, he tells anything about Boaz or Tubal-Cain or Jachin or that awful Mahabone, or even whenever a minister prays in the name of Christ in any of our assemblies, you must always hold yourself in readiness, if called upon, to cut his throat from ear to ear, pull out his tongue by the roots, and bury his body at the bottom of some lake or pond. Of course, all this must be done in secret, as it was in the case of that notorious man Morgan, for both law and civilization are opposed to such barbarous crimes. But then, you know you must live up to your obligation, and so long as you have sworn to do it, by being very strict and obedient in the matter, you'll be free from sin. What I've aimed to do in the last few parts is to show that through Freemasonry, Satan didn't abolish his plans in the Enlightenment. He merely changed tack and perpetuated his mysteries under a deistic or secular guise. The words of Weishaupt explaining the purpose of his order give it away. He said it was for illumination, enlightening the understanding by the sun of reason, which will dispel the clouds of superstition and of prejudice. We haven't seen language like that for a while, but the source of this enlightened understanding is the sun, and we know that the sun represents Baal. So the usual themes are all here: deception, control, total obedience to the hierarchy, and esoteric knowledge from the sun. In order to conceal the true meaning and nature of their society, Freemasons, like all occultists, make frequent use of symbols to communicate hidden ideas in plain sight. Having come this far in our study, we should now be equipped to decode these symbols when we see them, and so that's what we'll look at next.